Welcome to Frontrunners Innovate, where we connect you to global leaders meeting the world's challenges through business and innovation. Our guest for this episode is Dr. Chance Glenn. He is president of Morningbird Space Corporation, headquartered in Texas. Dr. Glenn is a frontrunner whom we've known as a tech innovator with a developed focus on space and exploring our relationship as people and planet with it. We'll do a little exploring of that today with my co-host, also a frontrunner, Ms. Shelli Brunswick, who is a well-known thought leader in space exploration and innovation, having served many roles globally in space tech, policy, women's advocacy around space, and more. She is currently the founder and CEO of SB Global in Colorado. Now, I'm your host, Mary Kurek, CEO of Frontrunners Development, a global business development company that connects business to change the world. So let's get you connected to Chance and Shelli for what I know will be a really enlightening conversation. Welcome again to Frontrunners Innovate, everyone. I have two special folks here with me, and both of them are frontrunners. Already have had an opportunity to interview these two, but not a chance to catch up with the redirections that they've been going through here lately and some of the advancements that they've been making. So as you know, we are having conversations today with Dr. Chance Glenn, Morningbird Space Foundation or Space, Foundation and Corporation, and also with Shelli Brunswick, and she is with SB Global Consulting. And so I want to give a chance for Shelli to talk a little bit more about what she's doing. We talked a little bit before we got on record, but I want her to share more about what she's up to now, because she is kind of changing up gears and moving ahead with some new things. And so we'll learn about her, and then we'll go to Dr. Glenn and talk with him a little bit. So Shelli, you're up.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me join you again. It's such a wonderful program. I enjoy joining you, and it'll be wonderful hearing Chance's story as well. Since we last spoke, I've launched the fourth chapter of my journey. So my first chapter, for your audience who may not be familiar, is when I enlisted in the U.S. Air Force right out of high school. I didn't have college money, didn't know what I wanted to do, wanted to see the world, and the Air Force gave me that opportunity. And while I was an enlisted airman, I went to school at night, went to college at night, earned my bachelor's and master's degree, and then became an officer in the U.S. Air Force and became a space acquisition officer. So I did all things space throughout my career. And then when I retired from the Air Force, I became the chief operating officer at Space Foundation. And that was an amazing opportunity to lead a dynamic team. And I just recently left Space Foundation to launch SB Global LLC, which is really where I want to be focusing on the future, which is about being a motivational speaker, being the bridge from the space industry to the rest of the world, how space is benefiting us. I'm also currently working on my first book called What's Space Got to Do with It? Lessons learned along the way. And then I'm also doing some strategic advising. So that is the fourth chapter of my journey. I finally have made it to being an entrepreneur.
Wow. I mean, as much as you've been traveling, and I have been watching that over the years, you have touched just about every continent pretty much, and have worked with a lot of countries who are looking at the space industry and wanting to grow it. So you have a lot to offer anybody in that space. So we look forward to having a chat with you. Dr. Glenn, let's get caught up with you a little bit. What's going on?
It's really good to hear from you, Mary. It's been a while. But first of all, I just want to say I was fascinated by hearing Shelli's story, because and if anything, we do need these voices out here talking about the space industry, why it's important and why we should be pursuing it with such vigor. Oftentimes, those who are kind of buried on the development side or technology side don't stick their head up long enough to tell the story why. So I think it's really, really cool that that's the direction that she's going amongst all the other things that she's been doing. So, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Shelli, as well. So my story at the moment is to build a company, Morningbird Space Corporation, and our goal is to bring technologies to life in the space industry. There are 4 areas, our website to tell you about it, but I'll try to tell you quickly, and that is One is additive manufacturing, which you'd mentioned. Another is in advanced propulsion technologies. Another is in space and autonomous manufacturing. And the fourth is really about an interplanetary network. And I'd love to talk more about that because I think it's really a fascinating and necessary way to go as we build out our spacefaring society that is humanity. So that's what I'm embroiled in, and we've gotten some support, and I'll talk about that as well if you'd like to know on how we're building this even further and further going forward.
Great, thank you. I really want you to hit on the eForge that you've just gotten into commercialization, and then I was kind of teasing a little bit with Shelli, the National Science Foundation, the cool new grant that you got not long ago. So tell us a little bit about that.
All right, yeah, let's start with the eForge. So this electronic alchemy eForge is a 3D printer that's capable of printing functional electronic devices. And that means you come up with an electronic device you want to have, and you can 3D print it and pull it on.
Oh, we're going to have some freezing again.
Who know me know that. But I've thought about, with 3D printing, how could you make something like the replicator, which essentially says you just tell it what you want and it makes it. Well, as an engineer, I knew there are certain types of materials you have to be able to print in order to make electronic components and devices and circuits and stuff like that. And so myself and a colleague of mine got together and started working that all out and came up with these 6 key filaments that we've now since patented the formula for and can print in our own printer, what's called an FDM machine, which is use filaments and all that. So it's a typical 3D printer, but it does way more than what the standard ones can do. And so we've been printing things like sensors, embedded devices for biomedical purposes, and there's many, many more types of use cases and applications that can come out of it. Now, so the last thing I'll say about that is the way we want to launch this is with educational institutions in particular, and we have a design competition that we're about to launch, which will put a printer into the hands of these university students, compete and make things, and then we'll get it out there for them. So that's the printer. I mentioned another aspect of our work in Morningbird Space was advanced propulsion. And I've been noodling around ideas on how you can actually warp space-time and came up with a mathematical prospect that actually has promise and turn that into an experiment. And so the National Science Foundation got interested in this and has funded it in a phase 1 SBIR. And I think as we carry the conversation forward, I think that for many of the listeners, it'll be important to know what SBIR can do for you as a growing company. And so we leverage that, not only the 3D printer as well, but now with this propulsion system I call experimental space-time distortion, we've gotten the National Science Foundation to fund that and just finished the phase 1 SBIR and now applying for the phase 2.
That like time travel? I mean, I'm just going to ask.
It is. Interestingly enough, time runs differently on the surface of the Earth versus up in orbit. And that's just because of the gravitational effect the Earth has. So time runs differently. Astronauts who go into high orbit are actually effectively time travelers because they go into one time zone and then they come back. So it's a little fascinating. It's only in fractions of a second, but anytime you get around a real high dense mass object, time runs differently. So that in a way, by warping space-time is actually also affecting time when you do that.
Wow. I don't even know what to say about that. That's just surreal. Well, I think probably what we want to do is kind of launch into a little bit of a conversation between you two, and I just kind of like kick it off with something I read from WEF, the World Economic Forum. It was an article that I saw in April of this year that said the space economy is expected to be worth $1.8 trillion by 2035, and is largely credited to the use of space with communications, satellites with all the link ups that we use to communicate with each other. And I guess that's just part and parcel of all the different devices that we're using now. And of course, the freezes with the Zoom, like what we're seeing, is showing maybe us what's happening there. But what else would we expect to be a part of that economy, and how might it impact aspects of our life like supply chain and logistics? Shelli, I'm going to go to you first on that. See what you think.
Well, absolutely. I think it's really a fascinating conversation. And one of the books I would like to recommend is from Dr. Jack Gregg. He wrote a book on the cosmo economy, which is, we're thinking about the space economy, and that's what the World Economic Forum is talking about, is really space on Earth. And it's like you said, primarily communications or GPS and things we're using. But we're not thinking about how space is really running a lot of other technology and is the backbone of that technology, because space is an infrastructure. How many times do people go to their phone now and they can do Airbnb or order an Uber? Well, we don't think of space technology as part of that innovation, but in reality, without space technology, those type of innovations could not happen. And then as we take it to the next level, we're seeing the rise of this cislunar economy, which is the economy between the Earth and the moon. And, and a lot of that is what we're seeing, but you're going to see more expansions. And I'm sure Dr. Chance has some great ideas about that. But the book I mentioned about Dr. Jack Gregg is really that expansion beyond that. And I think Dr. Chance has some ideas about that from his earlier conversations about what does that separate economy look like? That economy, that interplanetary economy, is going to be separate from the space economy we have on Earth. So I think we need to really look at the space economy as multiple spheres. It's the Earth economy, how space is an infrastructure running our banking, the Internet of Things, agriculture, creating new opportunities like Uber and Airbnb. Then there's going to be this economy that's the cislunar economy as we go back to the moon, this time to stay. What will that look like with research centers, potentially mining? Could that be helium-3 or other things? And then what is this interplanetary economy look like? And that economy will be separate from these other economies. So I'd love to hear, I can see a smile. So I know Dr. Chance is just waiting to jump on it. So I'll turn it over to you now.
Well, no, thank you. You touched on so many great points. And I like the way you have expressed this separation or delineation of economies between, let's say, our terrestrial base and our extraterrestrial. We can say that. It's not, doesn't mean little green man. Extraterrestrial is outside of Earth, right? So on the moon, near Earth asteroids, mining, things like that, space infrastructure such as building space stations, even for leisure, like hotels and things like that, but also being able to conduct business in near Earth orbit, in Lagrange points, for example. That's where the telescopes are sitting, being able to service those kind of things. All of that is creating an economy that's distributed and spread. And we have to almost figure out a new way to deal with all of that. Who's going to own it? Who's going to administer it? What governing bodies actually impact those things? There's space law being written and have been written in years past, but even more now. So there's all kinds of moving parts to it, but the driving force is to go out there further and further. I mentioned two things with our development of our company. One is in-space manufacturing, and we're proposing a concept of 3D printing parts and then using autonomous type drones to assemble in a swarm method to assemble structures in space. That's one way to create infrastructure in space. Secondly, an interplanetary network. Now, the astronaut, not Armstrong, I don't know why his name just went past me, but he first proposed this interplanetary network. But what I've been envisioning is almost like a space railway. And if you have a vessel or vessels that are zipping around an inner solar system constantly, and when you want to go somewhere, you link up with that vessel and it tugs you where you want to go. It then drops you off. And then when you're ready to come back, you just catch the next one coming and ride it back to your next destination. But you could provide goods and services to societies that are being built on Mars, on the moon, other planetary bodies and asteroids more quickly and more effectively than trying to launch from Earth every time. And as much as SpaceX is doing with their Starship, still the requirement for launching from Earth, refueling in space, all of this is very, very ambitious, and it's probably not the best infrastructure to support the growth in space. So all of this is happening.
Where's the money coming from? Who's investing in space?
Let me just throw a quick thing in there. I don't know if it'll take the conversation in another direction, no, but I'm part of a group with the National Science Foundation. And the driving force is to understand these deep things of space science and technology. Not that we are trying to, prepare for alien invasion, but we're trying to get out ahead in the technology before our national adversaries get there. And so with that said, and this is the answer to the question, at least I have, and that is the government is beginning to pour a lot more money into these areas to kind of fund off these major private companies. And think of like SpaceX just got a $1 billion contract to do some work for NASA, and so that's I think where the money's coming from.
What's your take, Shelli?
Well, I agree. I think the majority of the funding is coming from the government, whether that's the U.S. government or other governments, and you can see that in the breakdown from either Bryce or the Space Foundation, the Space Report, what the funding is for our current space economy. And again, that current space economy is primarily here to benefit Earth. And so you're seeing the governments are primarily funding it, and you're seeing where commercial is taking over, where there's really, low risk. They're really able to master that domain now, where you're seeing, communication. And as you said, rockets, launch technology. Up until 2004, it was the policy that you had to be a government agency to launch vehicles. Then when legislation changed that and allowed for commercial crew, that's when you saw the rise of this space launch industry. And now you're kind of seeing that with your space stations, as the International Space Station looks to be decommissioned in 2030, NASA nor any government really wants to be running that anymore. Now they really want to look at commercial. So you're seeing a lot of public-private contracts being formed to take some of that risk out of that activity, so that the commercial entities will take that over. And then government, similar to what they've done with launch, where they just want to purchase launch as a service, now the government just wants to rent a portion of those space stations. So it's kind of like a mall that we're all used to. And, the government, the US government or the European Space Agency will be a tenant in that mall. They'll still run those government experiments and activities, but then the rest of that space station could be rented for other things. Such as, obviously a big area that could be beneficial for Earth is healthcare, the microgravity environment, doing experiments with 3D printing parts, placements, as well as I know a woman, Dr. Nicole Wagner, who's Lambda Vision. She's 3D printing lens replacements for your eyes for macular degeneration. Currently, there is no cure for macular degeneration. It's something that as you age your eye, you can go blind. So this will be a wonderful technology, you're also seeing pharmaceuticals that could come to market faster. That's one segment that could really benefit from the government stepping out of a sector that could be really commercialized, which is that low Earth orbit, space stations and activities, and then start focusing on the next step. And as Chance said, the government is leading a lot of this because this is still a high risk, and it's leading it because there is other countries that are competing in this technology. And if the US and like-minded allies want to continue to be a leader in space and technology and innovation and economic development, these are areas that the government needs to invest in to ensure that the US and like-minded individuals stay on the cutting edge of the technology. And again, I welcome Chance's thoughts as well.
Thank you. You mentioned something as we were talking about, the government's investments and their concerns. There's been a lot of talk and interest about the UAPs. I guess we used to call them UFOs, and now they're unidentified aerial phenomena, or anomalous phenomenon. And a specific change because these vehicles that they're seeing not only operate in the air, but they also operate in water, underwater, and other modes of transportation. And they're real. They're real sightings. They're real things. And so the concern from the government standpoint is that if this is a terrestrial player, their capabilities that they're exhibiting are far in advance of anything that we know of. And so there's a concern there. If it's extraterrestrial, there's a concern. But what's even greater concern is that we be the ones that understand and exploit this technology first. And that's where some of the funding is coming as well to do that. Now that then will impact, and I want to go back to what you were saying earlier, Shelli, and that is all of these other cursory technologies that have benefited here on Earth because of space concentrating on space. I was looking at a list a little while ago. There's just so many things, there's too many to name, that we have benefited from because, and as you mentioned, the medical part of it, being able to do things in orbit. Well, we just submitted a proposal to the ISSRD, which is the research arm that took over the International Space Station's research from NASA. So we have a proposal for our printer on the space station, because to print electronics on the space station. So we'll see where that goes. But these are the kind of things that are the right out in front for concern for the government, and they're funding private industry, from the large companies to the small ones, to see what they can do with this stuff.
Point us back to another story that I saw, and that was actually out today on Wired, and it was the fact that the U.S. government wants to integrate the commercial space industry into the military to help prevent some of the cyber attacks that we've been seeing. I don't know about you guys, but I actually got hacked on my birthday from it wasn't Western Union, but I think it was Wise or whatever third party or whatever they use for financial stuff. And then the funny thing is, because I get a newsletter by another client that does cybersecurity, and it was listed there, and I'm thinking, I am so tired. This is like the fifth time in I'd say about 6 or 7 months that and 2 of them were healthcare related situations, and literally, it's like hospital systems that it's a third party situation that got hacked. And I know that's simplistic, but honestly, when you look at like USAA and some of these large Medicare and all these large, and then the large financial institutions, wow. So that is one of the things that they're looking at. But what is the anticipation here, and what are the benefits that you see from a protection standpoint and an economic standpoint with bringing in this sort of space industry sector to, and again, it's like you said, Shelli, it's really protecting us here on Earth, but bringing that to the military community.
A few seconds on it, and then I'll turn over to Shelli, because I'm probably going to scare you more than reassure you. Well, the elevation of our capabilities. We've got computers that are faster. We're looking towards quantum computing, which is going to allow, hacking and being able to crack, passwords, all that kind of stuff, so much easier. Then you've got artificial intelligence on top of that, which allows you to look at greater and greater possibilities. So the capabilities that you have for good and bad, and it's just this race. It's going to be this never-ending race. Some are going to get a little advantage, then we're going to figure out how to defend it, then they're going to figure out how to overcome that, and it's just going to keep going as long as there are people who are willing to do that kind of stuff. So I don't think there's a magic bullet that's ever going to be created that allows you to be completely safe. I just don't.
I think this is a great discussion. We talked about tech transfer a little bit earlier about the great products that came from NASA and from the space program. And you can see that in the NASA spinoffs 2024. I think over the course of the decades, it's been over 2,000 spinoffs. And that's not including one of them is telecommunications, what we're using today with Zoom. But that industry, like the Zooms and all of that formulated on the backbone of space are not really computed in that space tech transfer. So the tech transfer is amazing. And then I came out with a Forbes Technology Council article just last week where I talk about the tech insertion, which is exactly what you're talking about, Mary, which is where the government, Space Force, NASA, they realize that they've got capability gaps. Like they've created their architecture to go to Artemis, to go to the moon and on. U.S. Space Force has their architecture for their satellites and ISR and other things. And they know where their critical capability gaps are. And what they realize is industry is probably moving faster than the government is able to move and react. And so by providing this information, primarily it's to U.S. Companies, obviously, or companies like Airbus that have a U.S. subsidiary, where they're sharing where their technology gaps are, they know that industry is innovating and moving faster at a lower cost point than the government's able to do. So I think this is wonderful to bring that tech insertion into these architectures so that we can move faster. As you said, we're looking at, I think I just saw a story where you're seeing cyber security companies are now being looked at for partnerships for potential space stations. And I think you're going to see that norm starting to happen more. Like we know these cyber companies are working with the DoD to protect the DoD. The Pentagon is hit how many times a day with cyber attacks, but these satellites that were launched decades ago had no protection, right? We all thought that space was a safe, benign environment. And now we know those are big, juicy targets. And there's not a lot of protection. Now we can add hardening after the fact, and that's a bit challenging to do. But with the new technology, they're looking at it in service, in space servicing and potential extension of life programs that could be done to harden those. But I think we need to look at also, since we're talking primarily cybersecurity, we need to look at protecting those satellites that are transmitting telecommunications to a ground station or a receiver and ensure that that signal is not spoofed or disrupted or denied. Because what if that's to an airliner that you're on and GPS gets blocked? Or think about our food supply is dependent on GPS. Precision agriculture is planting our fields. John Deere tractors are out in the field without farmers in them that are harvesting. The entire logistics of how things are moving around the planet for not only food, but other goods is run through GPS. So if somebody spoofs or attacks GPS, a malicious player, that can have dire consequences. So we need to think about how do we incorporate cybersecurity into the architecture that's legacy, as well as how do we send up a new architecture that's a distributed architecture. So, the government's looking at going away from those big juicy targets. Now there may still be some of those, but they're looking at how can they now more partner with commercial industry and distribute their architecture on many satellites throughout the ecosystem. So just some thoughts that I'll kind of throw out there as well on how we need to bring more industry to bear on this challenge, because we are going to see, whether it's a company or ransomware, but we are going to see countries that will attempt to spoof our satellites, deny access, and so on.
Well, to add to that, you have this move towards automation and connectivity at the same time of almost everything. Internet of Things. You have our manufacturing industry. Everything is not only connected and automated, but also the communication aspect that controls, so control systems that go along with it. So, bad actors can get in there and do all kinds of disruptions. You've cited several, and there are a lot more that we are becoming more and more dependent upon as a society because of the technology. So again, it's kind of like you're creating all this capability, but you're also creating a vulnerability at the same time, and you've got to stay out ahead of it. And to me, artificial intelligence almost adds almost an unknown factor to all of it to accelerate the ability to do things. And again, those things can be really good and those things can be really bad. So all of this is in this big pot that you got to stir and see what comes out when it comes to cybersecurity and all that stuff.
A scary business. I'll tell you what, we've got to get ahead of that. I was watching a movie not long ago. I don't know if you've seen it, and I can't remember the name of it, but it had Denzel Washington in it. And it was wrapped around this technology that could actually, and I guess from satellite, ability, and of course this was, futuristic, could see into certain areas of a city or whatever, down into where a person was living into their home, and could actually see it in reverse. So what it was is a girl had gotten killed, and he was looking in her home like a week later, but he was seeing her before the murder took place. Oh. And it was like he was able to watch her go through everything and see when the murder actually took place. So he was a detective. But I was thinking about the innovations in space, because that made me think about the connecting point, in space, about the innovations yet to come, and what should we be talking about? What can we be talking about? Clearly, the movie producers and writers are thinking in those directions, and thinking about things like crime and how to resolve it. But what are your thoughts? What do you think is possible?
One of the things you might be alluding to is predictive analytics, and that's something that is already a part of our technological repertoire. Artificial intelligence adds to that immensely. And it happens, and you may wonder how your phone knows you're about to look up something that you're just thinking about. Well, it's not ESP. It's taking all of the patterns of things you've done in the past, it's your tendencies, what you look at, all that, and predicts where you're going. Mm-hmm. And so it's a really strong capability of artificial intelligence. And I think that is something that you may see. I can't say, I don't know whether it is or isn't, but I would certainly expect it would emerge in crime and crime prevention and law enforcement, is predictive analytics. Try to figure out what might happen before it happens and be there to try to thwart it. So
yeah, and that's what happened. He was able to stop it. But from a real life perspective, last weekend, a partner and I were looking up, trying to figure out whether or not there was a situation that was potentially a scam going on, and with some people that he was working with or trying to work with. Anyway, we were looking up the address and all that. He managed to find the address. He found the building, and he was able to go in the building virtually. I don't know how he did it, and go floor by floor and see that there was no such room number as the room number that was given in the address. So there was literally the address was false. There was no such thing. And I said, how did you do that? How were you able to, because that's what reminded me of the Denzel Washington movie, is the fact that he was able to literally virtually go into that building and find the room, or find where it should have been on that floor, and know that it wasn't there. So I think that we're already advancing in some ways to things like that. Maybe that's real time, I guess, but you know, where you can do the Google thing and look and see when it last took a picture of the front of your house. So, you know, other people can see that too, but this was a whole new level. I didn't know you could do that. But what innovations do you think should be there, Shelli, that we're not looking at yet?
Artificial intelligence and satellite surveillance, because we have more information coming off the satellites than human beings can process. And they have done what you've highlighted, that pattern of life in the military to pattern, you know, areas in, you know, Osama bin Laden. They're able to track things. And they're using satellite technology to look at, you know, monitoring oil wells and, you know, land geography for oil and gas industry. So obviously looking into somebody's house is probably not outside the norm of what satellites could do. Now, I'm going to put the ethics and the legal implications of that over on the side, because that will be another discussion that we're having, you know, that we can have another day about drones and all these other things. You know, using them, yes, but then what are the rights of individuals when a drone flies over your house or satellites? But the technology is happening on these satellites where they are surveying the planet. I mean, they're looping every day. So, but the question is, human beings, we can't process that information, and that's where artificial intelligence can come into it. And also think about driverless cars, right? You know, we're not quite there, but every car is going to be basically a sensor that's going to be able to feed into a system that then tells there's a traffic accident. And instead of me looking at my map telling my husband, hey, turn left, we got to get off, there's an accident in next, you know, in the next 100 yards. Instead, your car is automatically going to know, it's going to reroute you. You're going to be like, why am I going through town? But there's a traffic accident. So as technology evolves and the sensors both in space and on the ground get fed into technology, it's going to automate a lot of parts of our lives where we as humans are going to go, what is happening? Why are we getting off the freeway? And then what are the ethics of that? What are the legal implications of that? And so I think we need to think about, you know, obviously the movie with Denzel Washington, I could see a lot of, you know, rights advocates saying, you know, we're looking into people's houses. So good and bad of technology. Does the technology probably exist? I'm thinking if we can see down the earth to look at where water is and oil and gas, we probably can see in people's houses. Should we be seeing in people's houses? Are we processing that data? I don't know if human beings are actually processing that data. And I don't know if we have enough artificial intelligence to process that data yet, but there will be data being processed. Now, the question will be who is the human in the loop? Because AI should not be running on its own. It should be assisting humans. And so who are the humans running that? What government agency is running that? What are they doing with the data? How is that data stored? What is that data used for? And what happens if it gets hacked? Like we said, what malicious actors could get after it? Because like you said, we all think our banking information is being hacked, which it is. But the even bigger thing that's being hacked now is medical data. So I'll kind of pause there because I'd love to hear what Chance's thoughts are of the technology as well as the ethics and the legality of some of this.
Well, what I was going to add is that there's an initiative by the government called a digital twin, and that is basically to have a digital version of everything, any device, any type of thing. There's a digital version, and if you're familiar with CAD and computer-aided design and all that, you can make drawings and functional models of just about anything, whether it's electrical, mechanical, acoustic, what have you. And there's a drive to make a digital twin so that you could recreate anything you need. Plus, you could model it so you can know what would happen if you do certain things with said devices. So then you start marrying predictive analytics driven by artificial intelligence. And one thing you said, Shelli, which probably actually won't be the case, having a human in the loop at every place. That's just not gonna happen as data and opportunity gets more and more and more. And as AI gets more powerful, it's going to be more advantageous to stick a decision-making algorithm in there sans a human. Now, that could lead to all kinds of issues because right now you can ask certain AI engines questions that have an ethical nature to them and get some really wonky responses.
Yes.
You know, so you have to wonder how a fully automated AI engine would begin to make decisions on things that could impact many humans at any given time. And it's happening now, and it's going to continue to get greater and greater, I think, as time goes by, because we just can't help ourselves. That's all.
Oh, that's crazy. Wow, what a discussion. I'm going to have to end this up, but I love it. And I think it can go all kinds of different places from here. But what I want to do is kind of give each one of you an opportunity to say where you're headed, and are there particular, with that direction, are there particular people that you need to help move you along? So Shelli, I'm going to start with you, because I know where what you're doing now, but I don't know where you're headed with it.
Well, thank you again so much. This has been a fun discussion and I love it. Thank you, Chance. I hope we get to talk more, and hopefully I can interview you for my book series, because that is what my book series is about. It's about what space got to do with it. And the first book is on lessons learned, but I'm interviewing 200 global thought leaders to get their insights. So we're looking at things through the lens of space, but what I've learned is these are universal truths as it comes to leadership, as it comes to accomplishing your goals, as it comes to entrepreneurship and policy making. We're looking at it through that cool lens of space, but it really is about helping solve all our challenges together through this prism of these 200 global thought leaders. So that's my first project, is coming out with the first book, What Space Got to Do with It, Lessons Learned Along the Way. And I'm doing some motivational speaking. So if any of you are going to Ascend, which will be coming up in Las Vegas later in July, as well as I'll be at the European Rover Challenge. And so I'm looking forward to those fantastic events and meeting people and having some great discussions. So that's a little bit of what I'm doing and where I'm heading. And obviously I'm looking for people who are interested in being interviewed for the book, as well as helping to promote it.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you. We will definitely push that forward. When do you expect it to be out, Shelli?
It'll be out around October. I'm shooting for World Space Week, but in case we miss that, we'll try to get it by the end of October. So I'm halfway through the first halfway through writing the book now. So we're chugging away on it. That's kind of the summer project. It's exciting though, because I'm talking to amazing people like Chance who are sharing some great insights. So it's not just what I'm sharing from my journey, but listening to these other global thought leaders and opening up the aperture of what can be.
That's it. Oh, that sounds exciting. Okay, Chance.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Mary. But first, Shelli, that sounds stupendous what you're doing, and like as I said, really necessary too, because a voice needs to be there. I would certainly be honored and to be interviewed if you find it necessary. You can email me and set up a time where I'd love to do that. Also have a few other people that you might want to talk with. I would certainly, and you can look her up when you have time. There's Dr. Anna Brady Estevez with the National Science Foundation. She is very much driven to fund and promote space and space technology and the government's mission, and why. She may even help get into why there's a drive to do so. I think that would be a great interview if you can catch her. That's part of the problem. But she would be amazing, I think, as well. And I know other people if you need other names. But just quickly, so Morningbird Space Corporation is really about trying to provide the technologies to take humanity to the stars. I've talked about propulsion, I've talked about additive manufacturing, but right now we're focused on launching this eForge. It is available, it is ready for pre-order. We have a price tag for it. You can go on the website and see it. It is shipped in 90 days, but it is an amazing print. It can print everything that all the other printers, but a whole lot more. And we have all the IP and the mixing formulas to come out with these amazing type of devices from the filaments that we've created. There's some video on the website, plus we have a YouTube page where we show some different things that we're able to print. But our big picture is to continue to grow in this, get funding, and grow the company in those 4 areas I mentioned. And just so I recall, the gentleman is Buzz Aldrin, whose idea was this space tug to take things around our solar system. This is what we're building upon, and that's been funded by the NSF as well. And so all of that is very, very exciting. I'm a Star Trek person. I love it. That's what it's just childhood dream of mine to produce technology for the space industry. I'm living a dream.
I think what's great, Mary, is that Chance is taking us to space and the universe, and I'm trying to be the bridge from the space industry to the rest of us on planet Earth. So I think this has been a really complimentary discussion.
I think so. I think it's great. Well, we'll try to help both of you make the connections you need to make to keep doing what you're doing. Okay. So hang with me just a second. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody else, but thank you both for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I mean, you're wonderful, both of you. I love it. This is fantastic. Keep doing this wonderful work. So everybody else, if you're watching this or hearing this in one of your podcast places, you can go to frontrunnersinnovate.com and you can get this interview and some bio material, LinkedIn connections and whatnot on how to reach out to these folks, website information and all of that good stuff so that you can connect directly. Hopefully you'll get in touch with Shelli about her book for sure, and then you'll get to read about Chance maybe in there as well too. So we'll be able to circle back maybe again and find out more about what they're doing in a little while. So thank you again, guys. I appreciate it.
See you around the galaxy.